welcome back to the Content Podcast. You know it is a big week in football when one of the best managers of all time, Jose Mourinho, being sacked by Spurs is not the main headline. Reaching all news organisations, even non-sport related ones, is of course the proposal of the European Super League, which has caused mayhem for fans across Europe. Joining me today to discuss the matter further is none other than national newspaper journalist and TalkSport presenter, Mr. Alex Crook. Alex, I hope all is well. And before we get into the nitty-gritty of the Super League and what implications it can have or potentially not have and so on, what has it been like then for the past 24 hours to report, to work on what feels like such an historic event, and just to throw in for good measure, Jose Mourinho being sacked as well?
Yeah, a good day to bury bad news, and maybe a genius diversion tactic from Tottenham as well. It's been mayhem, to be honest. It's been chaotic, it's been seismic, all of those words. I think when we first got wind of this, I was actually commentating the lunchtime game on Sunday between Arsenal and Fulham, and my producer at TalkSport International just waved in front of me the article from the Times saying what was happening, and obviously I read that out, didn't really take in the ramifications of what was being put in front of me. Then I recorded a podcast, the Game Day podcast with Sam Matterface and Trevor Sinclair on Sunday night. And by that time, we still hadn't seen the statement from these 12 breakaway clubs. So I think we were still thinking at that stage that maybe it was a bit of brinkmanship. We all knew that UEFA were going to announce their own proposals as to how they would reshape the Champions League on Monday. And it looked a cynical ploy on behalf of those 12 clubs just to get more money or to get more control of that competition. It was only really when the statement landed late on Sunday night that actually you started to sit back and think they're serious about this. You know, the logo, for what it's worth, suddenly appeared. A very basic website also appeared on Sunday night. And then obviously on Monday, various clubs started to release statements, resignations from UEFA boards. Ed Woodward, I think, was the first to do that at Manchester United. And then the anger really set in. I mean, we were all angry on Sunday, and I think Gary Neville spoke for all like-minded football fans, all right-minded football fans, in my opinion, what he said on Soccer Sunday. I thought it was absolutely fantastic, you know, for a non-trained journalist, for an ex-player to come out and speak so honestly and so eruditely. He just captured the mood of the nation. I think read the room. He did that. I don't think these 12 clubs and certainly the English representatives, I don't think they've read the room looking at the backlash.
I think the one imperative factor on this is the implications it will have on the domestic leagues. And I feel if these teams are taken out of them divisions, then I really can see the bad side to things, to say the least, because it could have so many implications, not just for the divisions, but even below and so on and so forth. So for you, what would you say stands out as the big red flag amongst many red flags, it seems, for you, as to why this is just not a good idea whatsoever?
Well, first of all, the Premier League haven't backed it. So the way that English football works is that in order to compete in a foreign competition, clubs do need the permission of the Premier League. So that's the first big stumbling block. So if the Premier League are going to stick to their guns, that will mean those 6 clubs will inevitably have to leave the Premier League to go and play in this breakaway league, and that will be detrimental to the competition. It will be detrimental to what is the best league in the world, attracting the best players in the world. That won't happen anymore without the 2 Manchester clubs, without Liverpool, without Chelsea, without Arsenal. The Tottenham element is interesting because I'm not too sure how you can class Tottenham as a super club. I'm 38 and I don't remember them winning too many trophies in my lifetime, that they've never won the European Cup. So how they can be classed as one of Europe's elite is a bit beyond me. And even Arsenal, they're struggling to qualify for Europe for the first time in 26 years via the traditional route, via the Premier League. They're going to have to win the Europa League as it stands to get into the Champions League next season. So they're not really a super club at the moment. And therein lies the problem. You know, they're deciding amongst themselves what constitutes a super club. And in the case of Arsenal, it's based on their former glories. In the case of Tottenham, it's probably based on the fact they've got a really nice stadium and they host some NFL games. And even Manchester United, Leicester City have won the Premier League title more recently than Manchester United and Arsenal. Tottenham have never won the Premier League title. Liverpool hadn't won it in 30 years. until last season. So it's the arrogance of these clubs deciding that they are the elite, the cream of the crop of English football. That's what I don't like first and foremost. But the lack of competition. This game that we all love is formed on the basis that you are rewarded for what you do on the pitch. Okay, Leicester City and their Premier League win a few seasons ago got them into the Champions League, and the excitement that swept through that city. Blackburn Rovers, when they won the league under Jack Hayward, and again brought European Cup football to Ewood Park. Under this format, that will never be allowed to happen again. The closed shop nature of it goes against the grain of football. And you're a Manchester United fan, I'm a Manchester United fan. We know the history. Sir Matt Busby fighting tooth and nail because the FA didn't want English clubs to take part in the European Cup when it was first formatted. And obviously the sacrifices that Manchester United as a club made with the Munich air disaster. I think Ali McCoy's captured it perfectly on TalkSport Breakfast. So Matt Busby will be turning in his grave at what is happening now. The notion that rather than a competitive European Cup where you're playing on the pitch for the chance to get into that tournament and prove that you're the best team in Europe, you're just guaranteed entry. And you're guaranteed, therefore, that the rich trappings that come with it. It doesn't sit right in any way, shape or form.
Chelsea have reached the semi-finals of the Champions League, an incredible achievement. But would you really say that they're one of the top 4 teams in Europe? Ajax, when it was the Liverpool Spurs final, reached the semi-final. Would you say they're one of the top 4 teams? Would you say that Tottenham are one of the best teams in Europe when they reached the final? Obviously, as you've alluded to, they haven't exactly been basking in the glory of success. So it gives that opportunity in terms of this league and in terms of the new league, to outstandingly produce that winner, the champion of Europe. And I think what's so fascinating and brilliant about the Premier League is there's no room for argument. If you win over the course of a season, you deserve it, and no one is there to disagree with that. But then if you then adopt this idea into the European Super League, it's resented. And of course, there are a lot of holes in this argument. But in terms of positive...
the one big hole being when they formed the Premier League, there was promotion and relegation. It wasn't a closed shop. Yeah. Everybody was susceptible to going down. This isn't the case in this league.
Yeah, most definitely. I think that's exactly one of the big holes in terms of the positives for the European Super League, the relegation.
And you mentioned Ajax there. How much did we enjoy watching Ajax? And again, Ajax are a team who are steeped in history. I remember Ajax winning the European Cup. I think it was 1995 when Kanu was in their ranks. Overmars, if I'm not mistaken, was in their ranks. They've had hard times because Dutch football is not in great shape at the moment, but they still managed to rebuild, having sold their best players. They put their faith in the club's academy and they reached the European semi-final. That's a great story. Chelsea under Thomas Tuchel, okay, they may not be fantastic on the eye, but as a coach, he's got the better of Diego Simeone over 2 legs. They've beaten Atletico over 2 legs without conceding a goal. They deserve their place in a semi-final.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, obviously, if you do obviously qualify, you deserve it in a way. But then it does leave
for this competition.
In terms of obviously the latter stage of the Champions League. I mean, if you do get to that stage, there is an element of luck. I mean, in terms of routes to the Champions League final, there is still that area where you could just by pure luck receive a good draw and manage to work your way to the final without playing any of the big sides. With this new European Super League, in terms of the competition itself and for the big teams, and we'll get to obviously what effects it will have with the lower league teams eventually, but there's no room for argument because you are playing all of the best sides twice over at a minimum, it seems, with the home and away leg. So there will...
You're not, though.
Pardon?
You're playing historically the biggest clubs in Europe, the clubs that this group of 12 have decided deserve to be in the Super League. If I was a football fan and you said to me, you can play Leicester home and away, or you can play Arsenal home and away, what's the more difficult game at this moment in time? It's not Arsenal.
Yeah, most definitely. But then it also works in both ways because then Arsenal are still in the Europa League. And if they were to win that competition, I know it's all if, buts and maybes, but it feels like we're currently at that stage given the lack of specific facts and stuff. If they were to win the Europa League, then that argument would be completely destroyed, because then they have reached European success. They have reached the latter stages and reached that silverware, whereas Leicester, I think they reached the knockout stages, and unfortunately were knocked out. Of course, like I said, we're still very, very fresh into understanding a lot of stuff, and I think the big concern throughout the whole of this is what effect it will have on the lower teams and the teams who will not qualify. And that the thing that you so rightly said about the fairy tale story of Leicester reaching the Champions League. Even this season, if West Ham managed to finish in the top four, they would qualify for the Champions League, which, as you've said, would be a great story. So what are your thoughts then on what it could do to these lower teams? And is there any positive you can see from this new competition being introduced for them lower league teams?
None at all. There's nothing positive I can see from the whole concept. I don't like UEFA's proposals for the revamped Champions League either, effectively scrapping the group stage. Why fix what isn't broken? You know, there's a montage behind me of Sir Alex Ferguson, and you can probably just see in the bottom corner there him lifting the European Cup on that famous night in Barcelona. That was the greatest night of my Manchester United supporting career. And one of the reasons for that is because they had so many near misses along the way, losing in the semi-finals to Borussia Dortmund. That they should have won it that year, and they fought so hard. I remember when they first went into the European Cup, when they won the Premier League in 1993, and they struggled against Honved of Hungary in one of the early rounds. They lost to Galatasaray when Cantona was sent off, and they had to adapt on the job, and all that struggle. When you reach the pinnacle, as Sir Alex Ferguson's team did that night against Bayern Munich, it makes all the lows worthwhile. And if you're going into a league where you're guaranteed entry every year, then suddenly that hardship is taken away from you. And I think the victories would feel a bit hollow if you're just playing the same bunch of 12, the dirty dozen, if you like, season after season. Familiarity breeds contempt. It's great for fans as well, match-going supporters, to go to different places in Europe in the early rounds. I've covered Chelsea in Norway. I covered Chelsea in Valencia, and I know how much fans love those trips. When Portsmouth won the FA Cup and qualified for the UEFA Cup, they played AC Milan at Fratton Park, one of the best atmospheres I've ever experienced. They went to Wolfsburg and enjoyed the German markets. Even Manchester United fans don't want to play Barcelona in the Nou Camp every season. It's boring.
No, this is a common argument against the European Super League. But then I wrote a thread on Twitter, which, as I was saying to you a little bit before we started this podcast, didn't go so well with my friends that were not too shy of getting in touch with me and telling me what they thought. But
good on them.
The thing that you said, obviously, about Manchester United playing Barcelona 2-3 times a year, whatever it may be, can be boring. But I look at the domestic league, and I look at even just this season, Man United versus Liverpool. There was, as you most definitely will know, there was 2 games within the space of a week, one domestic in the Premier League and then one in the Cup. And 2 games within the space of a week, not in the space of a season, in the space of a week, and both of them were equally treated as huge games. They both felt, especially starting with the Premier League, it was a 0-0. It was obviously not the most entertaining game, but that feeling was massive. It felt like these were the 2 teams going for the league potentially at that time. And then a few days later, that FA Cup game was massive, because then it felt like, right, now we have the time to get revenge. Now it's the time to really make the most of it. And that was the same tie in the space of a week. If we can enjoy games like that, games like the North London Derby, which we look forward to every season, no matter where they are, because it's quite known that they're not doing so well, but we still look forward to them games. So do you not think we would look forward to the games, Man United, Barcelona, home and away in a competition, and right, let's really pit ourselves? And it's not just about luck in the draw. We might get a big team and see what progress we've made. Would you not be tempted whatsoever in terms of watching these games year in, year out?
No, because you're neglecting 80 odd other clubs in English football. You know, English football is not just about this fabled Big Six. English football existed before the Premier League, and you look at the Big Six. Chelsea have been relegated, Manchester City have been relegated, Manchester United were relegated. So football goes in cycles. Okay, so just because you're a big club once doesn't mean you have a divine right to always be a big club. part of the allure with English football in particular is that clubs like Brighton, like Bournemouth can come up. Bournemouth beat everybody in the Premier League in that Big Six, apart from Manchester City. They're back in the Championship now. But don't take those 5 years away from Bournemouth. And if they came into a Premier League without those big clubs, without the chance to rub shoulders with Manchester United, without the chance to play at Anfield and at the Emirates and the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, it dampens the whole competition. There is no competition. You know, English football needs those clubs, but those clubs also need the smaller teams. That's why English football is the envy of the world. What they've done here, they've sold themselves the likes of Spain. Spain's a closed shop. It's Barcelona or Real Madrid. Atletico flirt with breaking into it, but ultimately there's two teams in that country. The Bundesliga, and fair play to their clubs, they're not even entertaining the idea. But basically, Bayern Munich, if they turn up, win the Bundesliga 9 times out of 10. Same in France with Paris Saint-Germain, although they've got a title race this year. English football is not like that. It's unique. And that's why these other foreign clubs around the world, Juventus as well, they're trying to cash in on our success. They're trying to cash in on the allure of the Premier League. And we should be saying, no, thank you. Okay, we don't need to get involved in this. But the greed of the owners of these clubs has clouded everything. And listen, don't believe the Glazers care about the history of English football. Don't believe the Glazers care about the pyramid. Don't believe the Glazers even care about Manchester United. I've been told by a very good source that even Sir Alex Ferguson, the great Sir Alex Ferguson, coming out and voicing his disapproval, has been ignored in the corridors of power at Old Trafford, because these people do not care about English football. They do not care about the institution. And it's down to us as supporters and broadcasters to say, no, enough is enough. Our clubs are not playthings for millionaires just to line their own pockets. These are institutions. They've been there for hundreds of years. They'll be there for hundreds of years in the future. Now is the time to make our voice heard. And I would encourage match-going supporters, stop going to matches, stop buying replica shirts, stop buying television subscriptions. And any broadcaster even contemplating covering the Super League, don't. Because without those revenues, it's a non-starter. And that's without the argument about international football. If UEFA and FIFA are going to carry through that threat, it kills it dead. You try telling Harry Kane he's not going to play the Euros for England this summer. You try telling Mohamed Salah, we saw how emotional it was for him representing Egypt to the World Cup. They're the two things we have to do to stop this.
Yeah, I think most definitely that is the one thing, as I said at the start, is imperative. If this European Super League has any chance of working whatsoever, it needs to work alongside the domestic leagues, because as you've said clearly, that these top teams are the focus point for the teams coming up in the pyramid to be able to go and play at these clubs. But then these clubs, do they not have any right whatsoever for you to say, we are the pinnacle of the game. We are the games that everyone looks for in terms of when the fixtures come out. And these are the stereotypes, the away trips, as you said, to Old Trafford, the Emirates, Anfield, and so on and so forth. And another point is also what the implications could have on transfers. Now, of course, as unfortunately we know too well, the status and the name of Manchester United, unfortunately, has led, especially post Sir Alex Ferguson, into us being forced essentially to overpay for quite a lot of the players that we've acquired, because of the status of the club, because of the name, and because of that whiff of desperation for the players to come in. But then if we, let's say, for example, take a club like Aston Villa, who aren't in the argument whatsoever to qualify for this European Super League.
Well, they should be, because they won more European Cups than Tottenham and Arsenal.
Yeah. We'll take Aston Villa, and they have players like Jack Grealish, who before this European Super League was being priced at around £100 million. Now, if a European Super League team wanted to acquire Jack Grealish, could then Aston Villa not cash in and add another 50, 60 million onto that, because they know the big clubs can afford it? They know that they need them. And if they want their best player, they need to put down the money. And £150 million into any club is a huge amount of money. So could there not be any benefits, even from a financial point of view?
I think when football settled itself down again, that they will get Jack Grealish's market value anyway. Somebody will inevitably put together a package for Erling Haaland for £200 million, with or without the European Super League. So I think that's a short-term view. And again, this is what doesn't sit right, because what you're saying there, and you're absolutely right, is that these 12 clubs are trying to take advantage of what is a global pandemic.
Yeah.
Okay, because they know that a lot of football clubs are on their knees, and they're basically trying to hold the governing bodies to ransom, and they're trying to cause division at a time when we should be more united than ever. And to go back to your first point, we all know that Manchester United are a tremendous draw. There's the song, isn't there? You only came to see United. But based on what you've just said there, when Wimbledon comes around, then are we saying that Roger Federer, Rafa Nadal, and Novak Djokovic should automatically start in the quarterfinals because they're the big draw for the crowds? They're the matches that all the players want to play. Sport is about earning the right on the pitch. It's about meritocracy. What happens once you cross the white line? What happens once you get on the tennis court? What happens once you settle up? Nobody's got a divine right to say, well, we're the biggest club. You know, you're lucky to grace the same turf as us. That isn't how the world works, thankfully.
Yeah, it isn't how the world works. But then in terms of the FA Cup, the Carabao Cup, the big teams, the so-called the dozen or whatever around, they join these competitions at latter stages. So isn't that already a form of priority for being a big club, because they don't have to play the first round of the FA Cup, the second round of the FA Cup, because
Well,
they already.
That's more down to fixture congestion, and again, it's a fantastic draw for the non-league teams, because the FA Cup doesn't start in January when the third round comes around. It starts in August, right at the start of the season, with the first qualifying round, and it's fantastic for those non-league teams. They know the prize at the end of that is, if they get to the first round, they get the chance to play a team in League Two or League One. They get to the third round, they get the chance to take on one of the big teams in the Championship or the Premier League. That's the way it's always been. And again, I think we've got to be really careful to protect the history and the tradition of the English game. It is the envy of the world, and once again, that's why Juventus are not having a great time in Italy. Crowd figures even before the pandemic were really poor. That, you know, they're not the force of old. They want to jump on English football's coattails, and we should be pushing at the door and fighting tooth and nail to stop that happening.
Yeah, 100%. I completely understand what you're saying. A main problem would be because the gap would be extended from these clubs, obviously, compared to the ones below them, because of the investment and the money. But the one thing I think about is, just this season, we'll take two examples. Manchester City have spent around 850 odd million in the last 5 seasons, and they were beaten by a newly promoted side in Leeds, an incredible outfit, but a championship side last season. Manchester United have spent 1 billion post Sir Alex Ferguson era, and they lost to a relegated side in Sheffield United at home. My point being, there's already excessive amounts of money going around in the game, but upsets can still happen. Are we saying that this completely eradicates that possibility? Because at the end of the day, it's 11 v 11. It's shown throughout the history of the Premier League that money can be invested, but upsets will still happen. And Leicester City, the prime example of this happening, the clubs around them still had heavily paid for squads, and these upsets still can happen. So would you say that, without a doubt, the European Super League would completely eradicate that opportunity for the smaller teams to gain any form of success against the bigger teams?
Well, it will make the gap bigger, and you know, it's already a chasm. And you picked out 2 results there from an entire Premier League season, a season in which Manchester United have been far from vintage, but have still been a fair way clear of everybody apart from Manchester City. So the gap will inevitably get bigger. But the argument's almost redundant, because the Premier League have been quite clear. They won't allow these member clubs to just go off and play in a European Super League. So they will have to leave the division, and to go back right to the start of the conversation. If that happens, it changes the face of English football beyond recognition, and it changes it for the worse.
Yeah, most definitely. I cannot stress that enough. That is the big thing for me. I'm always open to change. I would always like to see things evolve. And I think, of course, in the 1990s, when Division 1 was changed into the Premier League, there were probably people around back then who were saying no because of the financial motives. But then if we were to say no to that, we wouldn't have the fantastic product that we have now. And of course, this is a little bit different, it feels. But just to round up everything, is there anything in terms of rules or any altercations made to the proposal by the European Super League that can be changed or added, even for someone like yourself who is completely dead set against it, to even contemplate having it in terms of implementing it into the season? Is there anything whatsoever that can sort of sway your decision?
The only thing they can do is get their heads together with UEFA and iron out the reasons they're not happy with it, the proposals for the reform of the Champions League. I actually think the Champions League does need freshening up a little bit. I think maybe there should be a more stringent qualifying process so that you don't get the group stages being quite as one-sided as they are at this moment in time. But certainly in terms of any kind of European competition where a certain number of clubs are guaranteed entry year on, year out, without having to earn that right on the pitch, is a complete non-starter for me, because it goes against everything that we love about sport.
These clubs can leave the domestic leagues, which will cause utter mayhem. But unfortunately, that's about all we've got time for. Alex, a huge thank you for joining me today and discussing the crazy subject that is the European Super League, which I'm sure we'll have many and more conversation about. Best of luck with everything, and enjoy what seems like a very, very hectic time ahead.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Huge thank you to everyone who has listened or watched today's podcast. I genuinely hope that we've all learned a thing or two about this crazy new idea of the European Super League. Please be sure to like, subscribe, as well as follow on all social media for more content by the content.